Good evening. The board meeting will come to order at 5 p.m. Good evening and thank you for attending the Albuquerque Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board meeting on June 11th of 2026. Ms. Barela, may I get a roll call vote?
Xander Bullionitz.
Present.
Eduardo Budanaro.
Present.
Aaron Calderon.
Present.
Georgia Duncan.
Present.
Ricardo Reichfeld.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Barela. With that, the next order of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance. All rise.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next order of business will be approval of the agenda. We have a couple modifications to the agenda. With that being said, I want to move the officer-involved shooting cases to above the serious use of force cases. We're doing two separate motions so we can keep track of it. So I make a motion that we move the officer-involved shootings to above the serious use of force cases. May I get a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Member Bullionitz. Ms. Barela, let me get a roll call vote on that motion.
Chair Calderon.
Approve.
Vice Chair Budanaro.
Approved.
Member Bullionitz.
Approved.
Member Duncan.
Approve.
Member Reichfeld.
Approved.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barela. With that being said, I have another motion to make for the amendment to the agenda. I want to move the order of business for appeals for CPC 277-25 to above, below public comment, above officer-involved shooting cases. Make it a second.
I second that.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you. Ms. Barela, make a roll call vote.
Chair Calderon.
Approve.
Vice Chair Budanaro.
Approved.
Member Bullionitz.
Approved.
Member Duncan.
Approved.
Member Reichfeld.
Approved.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barela. With that being said, is there any, one more. There's an additional one. At the request of Ms. Barela, the date, today's agenda states Thursday, June 11th, 2022, 6. We didn't want to modify that to 2026. May I get a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Member Williams. Ms. Barela, may I get a roll call vote?
Chair Calderon.
Approve.
Vice Chair Budanaro.
Approved.
Member Bullionitz.
Approved.
Member Duncan.
Approved.
Member Reichfeld.
Approved.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barela. With that being said, are there any additional changes to the agenda?
Mr. Chairman.
Perfect.
I don't know, we may want to consult with council, but maybe we have to approve the agenda as amended.
Yes.
All amended.
Yep, that's the next one. So with that being said, I make a motion that we approve the agenda as amended. May I get a second?
I second that, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Ms. Barela, may I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Calderon.
Approve.
Vice Chair Budanaro.
Approved.
Member Bullionitz.
Approved.
Member Duncan.
Approved.
Member Reichfeld.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barela. And thank you for the reminder as well. With that being said, we'll move to the next order of business, which will be review and approval of minutes from May 12th, 2026. Do any board members have any changes to the minutes from last month's board meeting? No, sir. Anybody from the agency? Nope, nope, cool. With that being said, I make a motion that we approve the minutes as written for May 12th, 2026. May I get a second?
Seconded.
Member Williams, thank you. Ms. Barela, make a roll call vote, please.
Chair Calderon.
Approve.
Vice Chair Budanaro.
Approved.
Member Bullionitz.
Approved.
Member Duncan.
Approved.
Member Reichfeld.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barela. With that being said, we'll move to the next order of business, which will be reports from city departments. First up will be Internal Affairs Force Professional Standards Division from APD, Major Dodi Camacho. You're flying through this.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For May 2026, I know that you all have the report, so I always feel like I'm just repeating what you already know. So for the month of May, the total cases were 37 and completed was 41. We had a total of 9 cases open with 10 completed for the investigations opened by Internal Affairs. Pending cases right now are standing at about 107, and the average days to completion are at 102, which is a little bit of an increase from last month, but I think that's due to not having the commander for IAPS and having to do several roles at one time. The total ESIs for the month of May was at 65 with a completion rate of 86. And then, of course, on the following page, we're looking sort of at the sustained findings of all of those cases. So primarily, the top SOPs for most of the completed investigations, I'll just do the top three, which were personnel, code of conduct, court, and scheduled and unscheduled leave, which is directly correlated to the sustained allegations. They are exactly the same as the top three. When you look at the top portion for the discipline recommended for the allegations, those are the cases that we are completing and the recommendations that we make to professional integrity. And so for those, you can see under each section, the discipline recommended, there's a variety that goes anywhere from ESIs all the way up to termination. There were a total of 4 termination cases for the month, 3 of which were a rollover from 2025. So, and that would conclude that. I do want to add that this is going to be my last board. I am retiring as of June 30th. So I just wanted to say thank you and all your hospitality that you guys have given to us. And if you have any questions, I think Major Ryan Nelson was here before. I think you got to meet him, so he'll be back and he'll be attending the board meetings from this point forward. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Unless you guys
Congratulations.
have any questions, sorry.
Thank you,
I should have
and
said that first, sorry.
Any questions?
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a second retirement, so I did it once before, so.
Well,
So
congratulations.
we'll be back is what we're
So we'll
hearing.
see you soon.
Trend.
Okay.
I don't know about that one. We're gonna say 2 times the charm.
Just go private sector. It's easier.
Yeah, I'm just gonna let Pete work. No
Awesome.
questions?
No questions. I appreciate
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Moving on to the next item will be Internal Affairs Force Division by Deputy Commander Troy Nico.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. Thank you for allowing me to talk and be out here. I know you were all provided with a copy of the May 2026 Use of Force report. I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but I do want to highlight some points here. Specifically, this was the first report that reflected our new Use of Force policy suite. That went into effect April 18th, excuse me, and this is the full month that we've had with this. So it's something that we've been watching very closely. The reason I want to go through the numbers is because they didn't change that much, which was kind of surprising to me. The trend seems to be holding. We're getting into our busy season of summer, but the spring and the kind of late winter numbers are still kind of matching. So we had a total of 29 events, use of force events. 23 of them were use of force and 6 were serious uses of force. You'll notice I didn't say level 1. We've gotten rid of the 3-level system. However, we do still have some level 1s that we are still closing out. So you'll notice in the report there was still a mention of some level 1s at the end. The highest area command was the Valley, actually was 7. And then Foothills, Southeast, and Southwest each came in with 5 each. So that pretty much matched with the normal trends that we've been seeing over the years. For types of force used, this was a big change. The highest types of force used was the 40 millimeter, our impact launcher, the handheld launcher, shoulder-fired weapon. We had 11 of those, followed by ECW with 10 of those, empty hand strikes with 4, and then of course we all know we had quite a few officer-involved shootings. 3 of those actually happened in May. So next was low-level control tactics, which this was a significant change as well because low-level control tactics are no longer considered a use of force. You probably remember in the level 1 where it talked about pain, things that were likely to cause pain. Those types of force events back then are no longer considered a use of force. They're considered low-level control tactics. The level 1 team has been tasked with transitioning over to an audit team, which will then be auditing the low-level control tactics. So there is still an auditing process for these. They're just not being considered a use of force. Okay. For those, we had 249, which again was pretty par for what we have been seeing in the past. And then the last thing I want to highlight is I constantly get questions about what are the ratios for uses of force per calls for service. This is one that I watch pretty closely as well. So per 1,000 calls for service in the foothills, they actually had the highest. Per 1,000 calls for service, we have 1 use of force. Southwest was per 1,000, 0.9. Valley and University per 1,000 was 0.8. Southeast was 0.7. Northeast was 0.6, and then Northwest came in last with 0. But the overall average is 0.8 uses of force for every 1,000 calls for service. That's really an important number. We wouldn't think it would be that low, but it truly is. It's amazing how many calls for service these officers are taking each and every day that actually don't result in a use of force. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Board members, any questions? Nope. Awesome. We'll let you off easy.
Thank you so
I
much.
appreciate that.
And I'm
Thank
not
you.
leaving, by the way.
We'll stay here forever. With that being said, we will, next agenda is going to be ACS with Mr. Jeffrey Bustamantes, Deputy Director.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again for having me here. So just going through our divisions pretty quickly and some of the updates from last month. I just got our reports over to your Director McDermott, so sorry that it's a little bit closer, but they are hot off the press. These will be our May reports. And so from our field division, we are seeing our calls start to go up as we usually do as we lead into the summer months. For May, we were about 450 calls higher than we were at this point last year, at about, I think it was 3,900 calls versus 3,500 and change. If this holds, we will see in the July-August timeframe, we might actually reach that 5,000 mark for the first time responded to in a single month. A lot of those calls, of course, continue to be unsheltered individuals, about 200 suicidal ideations and a decent few welfare checks, wellness checks in there. And then the big difference for us really continues to be the proactives that we're doing as we're seeing teams, especially with that bilateral split and the rest that we did, our team's able to get out there and see an individual in need and immediately pull over. From our violence intervention division, our school-based team just celebrated their graduation. So in our first year, we graduated 1 senior. In our second year, we graduated 6 seniors, which was all of our seniors. And then this year we graduated 12/13. So the 13th was an individual who was safer up in Taos. And so we supported their moving up there to complete their high school. And he actually came down and offered a comment to his other graduates as part of that. So we'll count it as 13. It was all of our seniors, and we're really proud of that as well. And that includes with our expansion to Del Norte. We are really fortunate, and this is something that council will see another hot off the press, that the motion will be there on Monday to appropriate some funding. We did get some Department of Health funding as well as some Healthcare Authority funding to sustain and expand our school-based violence intervention program. So really excited about that. Again, just as a reminder, that started as a W.K. Kellogg grant that, their kind of leadership was looking at getting more involved in this space back about 4 years ago. We transitioned it to a Department of Justice grant, and now we're really braiding multiple funding sources to try and get this to as many high schools as we can, and some really focused in on middle schools as well. We know that there's a really good return at that age, and there are some middle schools that definitely appreciate and could use the support. Looking at our admin division, they have been largely, I won't say underwater because they're really good at treading water, but staying right there maybe, getting our positions filled. We have an academy that just moved into on-the-job training, getting prepared for the next academy, doing all of our usual QA, and then of course wrapping up budget season since the last time we spoke. And as we kind of mentioned, budget season is not really wrapping up, it's just what phase are we into, but getting past and getting ready for the new fiscal year. Outside of that, obviously the thing I'm always most excited maybe to talk about is our Seasons of Nonviolence. We just had a movie last night, Jurassic Park, which was chosen by folks to show. We had about 2,000 attendees, a little bit more than that, was able to entertain them all, feed them all, and now we're doing some of the case management for anybody who is in need there to get them connected to services. We have a series of events that we are either partnered with or just supporting in general over the rest of this month, including tomorrow's United, Councilor Rogers, and I think a few councilors are supporting a soccer clinic that'll be happening just down the road from here. We'll be there as well, and we're supporting that. We also, on next Wednesday, will be doing a volleyball camp in partnership with Albuquerque High. So if anybody knows somebody who is under 18 who would like to learn some volleyball skills or sharpen them, reach out. We have probably about 40 spots left as of right now, and that's out of about 160 to 180. So it's filling up fast. Following after that, we'll have another movie the following week. We'll be connected to there's a few U.S.-Turkey watch parties. We are connected to a couple of them to watch the U.S. win that game, I'm sure. And then finally, in partnership with our Parks and Rec department, the Bomb Lomas, where the skateboarders and kind of roller skaters, everybody start at Wantabo and Lomas and skate down to the skate park and have a big party there. We expanded the seasons to include that and, in the partnership. And we love those, especially with our other city departments. So I think it really supports both of us quite well. Going into July, more movies, basketball tournament, basketball camp, and a pool party. So keep an eye out. And we will have a dunk tank at the pool party. It is now confirmed. So I think I mentioned that we might. So yeah, if anybody really wants to jump in the dunk tank, I won't, because I'm sure I've stressed out our fiscal team enough that they might try and work out some things. Happy to answer any questions, though.
Thank you, sir. Board members, any questions? No.
Will you be at the duct tank?
No.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Next on the agenda will be City Attorney, Ms. Lindsay Roseborough, Managing Attorney for the city.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Board. My name is Lindsay Roseborough. I am the Managing Attorney for the APD Legal Team in the City Attorney's Office. I wasn't able to make last month's board meeting, so I thought I'd introduce myself and explain a little bit about the APD legal team for some background. The APD legal team used to be called the APD compliance team, which was the team that oversaw the CASA, the consent decree with the U.S. Department of Justice, and the implementation of some of those reforms. We changed our name after the CASA to just the APD legal team because we do a lot more than that, but that included as well. There are myself and 3 other attorneys and a paralegal on our team right now. We do everything from reviewing basic legal work, reviewing contracts, MOUs, to we have attorneys who work very closely with Internal Affairs, the Force Review Board. We advise on policies to APD, and we are also involved in the McClendon consent decree litigation as well, which is the last remaining consent decree that the city is involved in. Those are the primary duties. One update that I have for you all is related to some ongoing litigation that the city is involved in. The city was sued by the United States last month in relation to the Safer Community Places Ordinance that was passed and signed by Mayor Keller in March. We filed a motion to dismiss. I believe that was filed earlier this week, arguing that this should be dismissed due to, and I'll just read a portion of it for you all, and I can share it as well. But the complaint's claims fail because the ordinance governs matters traditionally reserved to local government, falling squarely within Albuquerque's authority to manage and direct the use of municipal property and resources, protect access to essential community institutions to ensure public safety, and regulate employment relations to protect workers. So we are eager to get in front of the federal court and have this argument heard, and I stand for any further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, board members? Questions? Awesome.
Okay.
I appreciate your time. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
With that being said, next we'll move on to City Council, Chris Sullivan, and Council Services.
Good evening, Chair, Board. Chris Sullivan, Albuquerque City Council, Council Services. The update I have for you is that 2 board members, we appeared, and the agency director appeared on the Nob Hill Public Safety Echo last month. And I don't know how many people were in the audience, but we did a great recruiting pitch. And thank you, Board Member Reichfeld, and thank you, Board Member Bolyanitz, for attending. And hopefully we'll get to do something like that again soon. Also, at the Monday Finance, I want to say FGO, but it's Finance, Government, and Operations Committee meeting. OC 26-10, the CPOA July to December semi-annual report was presented to the counselors. It was moved that it recommended receipt be noted. The deputy director was there, and so was Gabe to speak, to answer any questions the counselors had. Once again, I will commend the agency for putting together the report was great. I mean, I didn't know how to summarize a 50 page report, but I got it down to 2 pages. Had a few mistakes. The director corrected me on them, but it gave the counselors what they wanted to see. So that's all I have, other than council will be on break. That doesn't mean that I'm going to be on break, but they'll be on break for July recess, and they'll be back in session August, first Monday in August, and that's when the semi-annual report will go before the full council. So that's my report. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Board members, questions? No questions, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it. Next on agenda will be Community Policing Council, CPC, by Kelly Mensa, Community Engagement Manager.
Good evening, Chair Bolianitz and Honorable Board. How's everyone doing today? Oh, I'm sorry. Chair Calderon, I'm sorry.
I won't give it away.
You guys are starting to look like twins after a couple of years, so, Honorable Board, and nice to see we have a brand new member. I got to meet her tonight. Very nice. I want to invite everybody online for taking part in our democratic process, and also our officers here, city employees, and everyone else who's here tonight. We had a lot going on in the last 30 days. We had 9 possible recommendations to be discussed by the Albuquerque Police Department. We went over those last month. There was a lot going on. A lot of them we decided could be better off, rather than having official recommendations, just having a discussion with APD, with emergency communications, or whatever department that they were tilted toward in the first place. So we've done that, and we've cut it down to 3 possible recommendations. That was 26-2, which is new options for recruiting APD officers. I came up with this one myself. I've got to say, I'm proud of it. We're going to go to territories, U.S. territories. How about Puerto Rico and Guam to get officers? I thought it was a good idea anyway. And they responded back and they said it's got some possibilities. We'll look into it, and we'll look as a further possibility when we work some things out, so that's good. We had 26-3, which is an improvement of the APD website. We have a lot going on with the APD website and the city website in general, in which one of our members in the foothills, who is a scientist up at Sandia, said, some things could be improved, so we came up with this recommendation that we would help APD to go over the website, eliminate the broken links, send everyone who emails in a response email, make sure things connect with other city websites, and just make it more user-friendly, and do an edit on AI as to what works and what doesn't work. And they said that sounds like a good idea. We've been in contact with Gilbert Gallegos as to how to move forward with that. The third one, 26-4, is public education on the law enforcement project in New Mexico. Who does what in law enforcement in New Mexico? And one of the questions I get asked at the CDC meetings is, what about the revolving door? How is APD going to fix that? Well, APD is not responsible for everything, and we just would like to put more education out there to the general public as to what the legislatures do, what the public defender's office does, what the prosecutor's office does, the different law enforcement agencies, the federal agencies, et cetera. And we're working on ways to do that. They felt that was a good idea as well. We wrapped up our month-long discussion on the 2026 Metro Crime Plan with Xochitl Campos-Biggs, who is the Chief Policy Analyst for APD. We got a few things out of that. She seems quite open to assistance. She was willing to listen at all 6 meetings as to what we found important and how we could help the legislative process when she goes every year in January to speak to the legislators. It's going to be a 2-month session this year, so it's going to be important. The best way you get involved is to contact your legislators And I think we all may know that on some level, but it's good to hear from someone who's actually involved in this process. The crime plan number 3 is a working document. The one she turns in earlier in the year, late in the previous year, changes through the year, especially now that we have a new chief. There are going to be a lot more bullet points, a lot more points of interest that are going to be changing, and it's actually going to be a longer and more involved document. It's about 3 pages now, so it's a good thing. For the month of June, most commands, if not all of them, are going to have a visit from Albuquerque Fire Rescue, and that's Chief Emily Jaramillo or one of the other chiefs. And another question I get all the time is, what am I going to do about fireworks in my neighborhood? I hear it all the time. My dogs are scared and I don't want my house to catch on fire. They're setting these things off in the open spaces. What am I going to do? And we've had 3 visits already, and the news might not have been exactly what people wanted to hear because, like with everything else, it's a numbers game. There are not enough police. There are not enough fire marshals to go over every block in Albuquerque as to who's shooting off illegal fireworks. I did learn an illegal firework is one that goes more than 6 feet in the air, or one of those that makes a really loud noise, which is M80s, cherry bombs, all the stuff I had a lot of fun with when I was a kid. So those are illegal in Albuquerque at this point, and it's probably a good thing. We all hear about people blowing their fingers off, right? So let's get rid of them. You can sell them in counties outside of Bernalillo and bringing them back, though, and there's just not a lot that can be done about that. So in order to have any sort of punitive issue for someone shooting illegal fireworks, they have to be actually watched and noticed by either a fire marshal or a member of APD. And then it's a civil case, it's not a criminal case, so you get a fine. So we learned that much. A few councilors have had visits by city council, a few councilors have visits by city councilors as well. Stephanie Tejas came to the southwest, and her or her policy analyst will come to the northwest as well, as her council is on the borderline pretty much. It's more northwest, but a lot of southwest also. And Tammy Feeblecorn visited the northeast on Tuesday. That was a pretty live discussion about fireworks as well. She's pretty passionate about that. I tabled at the annual Foothills Touch a Truck event on Saturday, and that was a good deal. That's Renee Grout's once-a-year deal to get all the city and county and state trucks up there so the kids can take a look at them and see what the firefighters and the bus drivers and the police are working with, and just get to see all the equipment. They had the drones out there, they had the helicopters, they had climbing walls and all kinds of good stuff. It's a good event. Met a lot of people. We made our biannual supply order, which will give us a lot more swag for these events and more shirts and more other things. And I verified that the warden will be coming back to visit us again and doing a round of meetings in the fall. That'll probably be in October. We'll see. So in the meantime, we're working on some other stuff, such as warrants, getting warrants excused in Albuquerque and separate units of APD. So hopefully we're keeping people involved through the summer when generally attendance goes down even lower than it has been usually. We get a lot of people online, a fair amount, but not that many in public during the summer at all. So that's it for my report. I stand for questions.
Thank you, sir. Board members, questions? Nope. No questions, sir.
All right.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a nice afternoon.
You as well, sir. Next agenda will be from the CPOA, so Executive Director Diane McDermott.
Thank you, Chair and Board. So the CPOA received 92 complaint intakes from May 1st to May 31st. 29 complaints were assigned for investigation between the CPOA or those already appropriate with IA. 20 driving complaints were resolved with the supervisors, and 34 were miscellaneous where either insufficient information was provided, it was determined that APD personnel were not involved, or the complaint was resolved in some way to the citizen's satisfaction due to seeking information. 9 were submitted for mediation or for informal mediation. 7 commendations were received for the month. The City Council approved the amendment to the ordinance unanimously concerning the CPOA's authority to investigate APD personnel on May 18th.
Primarily, the issue at heart of the amendment was to clarify the CPOA's jurisdiction when it pertained to non-sworn personnel. There was an original concern raised primarily due to the semantics and the use of the word officer in the ordinance, so that has now been clarified and corrected. The budget season, as you heard, is pretty much come to an end, or at least that portion of it. The final council approved the budget on the final budget was approved on May 18th. The approved budget for CPOA is $3,124,000. The majority of that is personnel expenses. Operationally, the biggest line item there is our lease and janitorial services, which are at about $158,000. We would like to welcome our new administrative assistant, Tasha Baca. I think all of you got a chance to meet her beforehand. She will be the new board's main contact for agendas and certain other tasks when she is ready to take those on. The New Mexico Legal Law Group, I would like to just say, this is not 100%, but mostly, I guess, will likely no longer be representing CPOA and CPOA-B next month. Their firm is basically moving on from taking city contracts. I do want to take time to thank Robert Kidd for being excellent counsel for us, and also Randy Audio, who's not here, of course, but has provided some assistance on that. We are working with City Legal to try and get new counsel if that's how it winds up being. But again, we want to take thanks to him and the work that he did. Chris Sylvan already mentioned that we did go to the Nob Hill Echo meeting, and so that was again intended to inform the community about how board members become board members and use some recruiting opportunity, as well as put a bit of a plug for the community policing councils as well, for members to be interested and engaged in the process and improving things. The CPOA also hosted a delegation from Central and South America on May 21st, and that event was organized by Global Ties Albuquerque in collaboration with the Department of State. Chero Calderon was there, Kelly Mensa, Gabe Reamer, Ali Abbasi, and myself. We all presented different aspects of oversight in Albuquerque and what the roles of the CPOA, CPOA-B, and CPCs were. It was an engaging conversation. We had members from, like I say, several different countries. Some of them had something similar to us and had some questions about the challenges they face, and it's, you know, I guess not a surprise that we face some of the same challenges, so a lot of commonality there. Normally I would not make a comment regarding officer-involved shootings during this report, but since there have been 4 since May 24th of 26, I did just want to provide information to the board and the public about like what is entailed in the process. So the multi-agency task force, Internal Affairs Force Division, and the CPOA are all called to the scene of a shooting. Usually it's myself, but sometimes it's others from the CPOA generally respond to and participate in the investigative briefing at the scene. Then there is a briefing, usually a few weeks later following the event, to provide information about what is known at the time while IAFD continues to investigate the incident. Once the case is completed, it then goes through some reviews through the various aspects of APD, and then it's heard by the Force Review Board. And this consists of higher-ranking APD personnel and either the director or deputy director of the CPOA. And the Force Review Board examines policy and training referrals that should be made as a result of this incident. That's their primary function to this. Then once it's heard by the Force Review Board, it does come to you as the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board. And you review and assess if there's anything additionally that can be learned from these incidents. These incidents are too recent to draw any type of commentary or conclusion. There's no immediately obvious trend, such as type of call, location, or personnel involved. The only commonality so far that's been to light is that there's been some presence of some sort of weapon. So each of the cases will be reviewed in the coming months, so I just wanted, again, for board and the public to understand that these are taken seriously. Obviously, there's always concern when the numbers go up, but they do go through a careful review process. My final couple of points is please remember for the ad hoc, for the semi-annual audit, we need to schedule that. We are kind of coming up to being past due on that, so please let me know possible dates. There is a minimum of a 10-day notification that we need to post that. And same thing for PSA training, if you have either a day or a day to avoid, so that we can get that scheduled, and same thing with use of force training. But all of you need the training on the new policy. There's a lot of changes, as you've already heard. You, of course, we're all engaged in the policy revision process, but now it's that training piece that you need. So if you'll email me any days to either avoid or weekdays that'll work for you, best for you, we'll get that scheduled. And I stand for any questions.
That email is actually in all our inboxes from earlier today from Executive Director McDermott. So look for that email about the days for the use of force training. With that, any questions from board members? No? Perfect. Appreciate it. Thank you. So moving on to the next order of business will be public comment. There is no written comment. And is there any in-person comments?
No, Mr. Chairman, there was no public comments.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So with that being no comments, we'll move on to the next order of business, which will be the appeal. Give me 1 second as I transition. Is Mr. Jesus Lopez here? Awesome. You can stay right there, sir. You're fine. So make sure you're here first. Let me go through a whole spiel, okay? So we are now going into the appeals process or appeals portion of the agenda. Our first appeal will be CPC 277-25 brought by Mr. Jesus Lopez. Mr. Jesus Lopez is present. With that being said, APD is here as well. Oh, there he is. Okay. Well, I thought I saw you, sir, walk in. Perfect. And then with that being said, I am going to ask council to read your beautiful spiel. We need to take a copy of that as well, sir, just so you know. I swear I had it at one point. Can't find it. I need it again.
No problem, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're now at the appeals portion of the agenda, and the following process will be followed in each appeal. During the appeal hearing, each interested party has an opportunity to be heard and present arguments stating their position. No new evidence will be permitted to be introduced during the appeal hearing. The hearing today is a quasi-judicial hearing, and the decisions will be made by the members of this board. The scope of this appeal will be limited to the complaint and the findings of the investigation that followed. If parties during their presentation go outside of this scope, they may be directed by the chair that only arguments that will be considered by the board are those relating to the complaint and subsequent investigation. We are recording this meeting tonight so that a complete, clear record can be created of everything being said. However, please remember that we cannot create an accurate record with people talking over one another. If people start to talk over each other, the chair may call for order so that there can be a clear record of the hearing. The time limits for the hearing are as follows. 15 minutes for the complainant who requested the appeal or the representative. They may call witnesses, but this will count against their time. 10 minutes for the CPOA director or designee. 5 minutes for the police officer if he or she is present. 10 minutes for APD, and then 5 minutes for the complainant or their representative to provide a short rebuttal to anything that has been presented by the other parties. The burden of proof is upon the complainant bringing the appeal to demonstrate either 1, a policy was misapplied in the evaluation of the complaint, or 2, that the findings or recommendations of the director were arbitrary, capricious, or constituted an abuse of discretion, or 3, that the findings and recommendations of the director were not consistent with the record evidence. These are the only bases upon which the board may modify or change the findings or recommendations of the director. At the end of each party's presentation, the board will be given the opportunity to ask questions. These questions do not count against the party's presentation time. The questions should be focused on clarifying the record or the argument given and should not offer or invite new information or evidence from a board member through asking the question. Parties should remain respectful and professional during their presentations. Any disruption of another party's presentation shall not be tolerated. At the close of the hearing, the board will deliberate. The board may make a determination in open session or decide to deliberate in closed session as allowed by the New Mexico Open Meetings Act. All final decisions by the board will be made in public. Once a decision is made, a final written notice of decision will be provided to all interested parties as provided for in the CPOA ordinance.
Thank you, counsel. With that being said, Mr. Jesus, you can come to the podium right here. And just to reiterate some stuff before you start, okay? If you can try your best to not use officers' names in there because we don't have that on our axis. And also, you have 15 minutes. We'll get that timer set for you. And then also, when you first start, please say your first name and last name so Ms. Barela can take proper notes and she doesn't hurt me later on. And so, are you ready, Katrina? Awesome. The time is yours, sir.
So my name is Jesus Lopez. Thank you, board members, for seeing me today. As I familiarize myself with this, I just want to go ahead and start by saying I'm just here to clear the record. There was a mix-up in my paperwork, and I want to start by saying two of the things that the Officer T did correct and did really well. She actually did go to the H7 building and the D3 building and investigate what I had reported. The clerical error was in the information with a previous incident involving APD, and that's what happened in my paperwork. But what I wanted to bring to your attention is the fact that when somebody calls for assistance and leaves specific instructions, you know, to ring the doorbell because there's dogs, children, and maybe somebody that suffers from mood disorders inside of the home, and if that can be please taken into consideration very seriously. I don't think it's okay for an officer to ring the doorbell and before it even rings to start hitting a screen door, that whether you want to consider it beating by show of force, it's still a closed fist the way it was hit. So it's that my door's being battered. The only difference is the door cannot press charges. So that being said, there's that I think should be taken more seriously, because when somebody calls for help, we expect to be treated as the person needing help, not a suspect, not someone in question, or not someone that has been doing something wrong. And also the second concern I had was the response time. I feel like I reported criminal activity that I don't know where it falls in the levels as far as the police department goes, but should have been taken a little more seriously than exceeding over 3 hours to come in and take a look at. And that being said, I think that this is not a case of pointing out what was done wrong and putting the department down, because they do try their best. I see the news every day, and it's just a question of what could have been done better and how we can learn from it, because as Mr. Kelly pointed out, the public does need to be educated with certain things, and I think vice versa. The police department can also learn from the public as well. And I thank you for that, and if there's anything you guys may want to add or ask, I am open.
Thank you, sir. Board members, do you have any questions? No? Cool. At the time, we have no other questions, sir. So if you want, you have a seat back down there. We'll allow the other entities to go about their process, and then we'll call you back up here in a bit, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So with that being said, a CPOA Executive Director McDermott, the floor is yours. Well, stand by, sorry. I'm rushing Katrina, poor thing, sorry. Ready? Okay. The floor is yours. Thank you, Katrina.
Thank you, Chair. So as Mr. Lopez has said, apparently there was some mix-up on some of his complaint issues, so I won't go into all of what was raised in the original complaint or appeal request, I guess you'd say. To the point of the door knocking, so the officer was not aware of the requests. That was not conveyed to her. We actually did pull radio communication as well as the CAD notes to see if that was ever notated. That is not an SOP issue, so we did not try and address that with the operator at the time, because it's not something that would be a violation of policy one way or the other. I can appreciate Mr. Lopez's requests, and perhaps like he said, there might be issues in the home. The officer did ring the bell first and then did knock on the door. Again, we can agree to disagree about how violently or aggressively that was done, but the fact is they're trying to raise a response, and Mr. Lopez wasn't home. In fact, the communication was all occurring through a Ring doorbell communication, but again, it would not be a violation of policy to try and get the response from the occupant. As Mr. Lopez pointed out, yes, the officer did go ahead and go to the apartments that he listed and did try and speak with the individuals. They denied it. They said, these are our homes, we belong here. Mr. Lopez isn't the landlord or the individual in charge of the apartment, so the officer can only make a consensual encounter to try and say, hey, we've had these complaints, just FYI. And that's what she did. So as Mr. Lopez pointed out, she did what she needed to do in terms of an investigation there. The response time, again, I can appreciate many members of the community are concerned and expressed concerns over response time. When Mr. Lopez called, he was informed at that time the level of severity of this call would be 3 hours or greater potentially. So that was conveyed to him at the time. When it comes to what a priority system is, there's usually I think it's 5-tier system. Level 1 is an immediate threat to life, and then they go down from there. What Mr. Lopez was reporting was an ongoing concern of activity. I think he had reported to the operator, but definitely to the officer, of this was a 4-year ongoing issue of these potential people potentially trespassing or squatting, and there were other activities or concerns of various crimes, but they were not immediately happening that day, that moment, that he conveyed anyway. So the call priority was correct in what was reported to the operator, and he was informed at that time it would take that long. Again, the department doesn't want it to take that long, but it is what they have available to them in terms of manpower and resources. So it can take that long, and he was advised that. So that is another issue that is not an SOP issue, but again, his concerns are heard because a lot of community members have the same concern. So, I mean, that's pretty much what he raised. Again, there are some things that were raised in the appeal request that he didn't really go into. So, I don't know that it's necessary to go into here, but basically the officer did comply with policies, did do what she needed to do given the information that was available to her at the time. So, stand for any questions.
Thank you, Executive Director. Board members, any questions? Perfect. Thank you. Up next will be APD's portion. Hey, sir. How are you?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you, board members. Sean Waite with APD Professional Integrity. As we've discussed before, and for members watching remotely, I review all misconduct allegations that come from APD, CPOA, area commands, vehicle crashes, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think I have anything to add to Ms. McDermott, to her response. As she said, and I'll go in reverse, as she said, call priority it can be a problem because of the amount of calls coming in. The way that we try to mitigate it is to supervisors constantly review calls during shift to determine if some of them can be changed in priority or downgraded, or if maybe it just requires a phone call. So there's a constant process of juggling those call priorities. As Ms. McDermott said, basically priority ones are somebody's bleeding or about to bleed, right? And then it goes down from there. And then the other, the doorbell issue, I would say to Mr. Lopez and to members of the community that would need to be communicated clearly to dispatch or on the call. That's not something the officer's necessarily going to know. Usually they've just responded to a call and they've cleared that call and they're responding to the next call. En route, they're trying to get a handle on what's going on in the next call. They may be screening their computer in their car, their KDT, to determine what's going on, and that's where they get their information. So we see, not regularly, but we do see complaints where somebody says, hey, I wanted somebody to make contact directly with me, and the officer just overlooks it. So I'm not necessarily surprised, but if that's something that's desired, then it needs to be specifically noted in there. So again, we reviewed the call. I mean, I appreciate Mr. Lopez saying that he felt the officer did make contact. She did. I saw some additional notes from him in the appeal that there were complaints about people camping in the apartments, but that wasn't visible on OBRD. If it had been visible, I'm sure the officer would have taken whatever appropriate action was. So again, no policy violation by the officer in this case. Board members?
Thank you, Commander. Questions? No questions, Commander. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Cool. Awesome, perfect. So now, Mr. Lopez, you can come back up for 5 more minutes if you have anything else to add to that. And then if you have any additional questions right before. So,
Yes.
go ahead.
What was your name again? I'm sorry.
Sean Waite.
I appreciate you, Mr. Waite. You did mention to be specific, and I was very specific on the phone call with dispatch. I told her that if they were to beat on the door, my dogs would get triggered and they'd get loud and they wouldn't let us hear each other. And that my children do suffer from disorders that loud noises can trigger them. And I did relay all this to dispatch, and I even confirmed with her, is this something that you can do? Can you tell this officer? And the dispatch said yes. And with that being said, I conclude.
Thank you, sir. Give us 1 second. Do you have a question?
Mr. Lopez, I do have a quick question for you. When you started and everything, I want to know what your preferred outcome is on this. Like, what are you looking for? Are you looking for just, as Deputy or Executive Director McDermott and even Commander White said, there is no SOP. Are you wanting us to look into establishing an SOP? Like, what are the outcomes that you're looking for?
I think if we need to establish an SOP, that would be a way to go. But I think just on the communication, it all goes back to communication. If we can't communicate something simple as a request from the caller, like he said it's possible, then that's where the whole problem lies within. I'm not sure what solutions to present to you guys when it comes to something like that. I did stress to dispatch, I even asked her, is this something you can do or not, so I can be ready for it? And she said, yes, I will do that. So that's where that's where I was like, I felt like I needed to speak about this, because the quieter we stay as a public, it just goes unnoticed. And I'm a single dad. I have custody of my kids, and I raised them by myself. No help. The mother abandoned us once I got the custody. So these things are important to me, and my peace is very important. I'm a citizen of the United States, and I try to live a respectful life the way we're supposed to, be a productive member of society.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lopez. Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing this up to our attention. I really do. And so that's where I wanted to understand what the ideal outcome was. So I appreciate your time and taking the time to come talk to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just 1 second.
Yes.
Board members, any other questions? Okay, thank you, sir. You can sit down for now. Thank you. So with that being said, I move that the board convenes in closed session as authorized by the Administrative Adjudicatory Proceedings exception to the Open Meeting Act for the limited purpose of discussing the matters presented in CPC 277-25. May I get a second?
I second that, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Ms. Parra, let me get a roll call vote, please.
Chair Calderon.
Affirm.
Vice Chair Budunaro.
Affirm.
Member Bolianis.
Affirm.
Member Duncan. Affirm. Member Reichfeld.
Affirm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Parra. We'll
You're
be back
welcome.
momentarily and we'll discuss in closed session. I make a motion that we come out of deliberation. May I get a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Member Bolianis. Ms. Barrera, may I get a roll call vote?
Chair Calderon,
Approved.
Vice Chair Budinara,
Approved.
Member Bolianis,
Approved.
Member Duncan,
Approve.
Member Reichfeld.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barrera. Mr. Lopez? Do you mind coming up to the podium again real quick? And with that, I'm gonna pass it off to our Vice Chair to give a response.
Mr. Lopez, again, appreciate you coming out and bringing that to our attention. As a person with the doorbell camera and security and 3 very vocal dogs, somebody hits the door, I'm going to raise a level of colorful adjectives because nobody should hit your door like that. I understand. With that being said, we agree with the findings of the CPOA. We would suggest that our director reach out to communications to make sure that and they'll do what they'll do, but that they follow up and see if that could be part of the training, as well as make sure that all communications are clear. And with that, I'd like to thank you again for coming. Appreciate you bringing it to our attention.
I appreciate you guys giving me the time and allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Of course. And also, you'll receive a letter in the mail with a detailed response to the
Okay.
formalities of it, so you'll get that. And of course, if you have any other questions or any other issues down the road, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Okay, no, thank you.
Yeah. Awesome, thank you, sir. It's awesome. I make a motion that we uphold and affirm the findings of the CPOA director for CPC 277-25. Make it a second.
I
Seconded.
second. We all second.
We all second. Thank you, Member Bolianis. Ms. Barrera, let me get a roll call vote, please.
Chair Calderon,
Affirmed.
Vice Chair Budinara,
Affirm.
Member Bolianis,
Affirm.
Member Duncan,
Affirm.
Member Reichfeld.
Affirm.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Awesome, thank you. Again, thank you, Mr. Lopez, appreciate it. With that being said, we are going to go to dinner break. So I make a motion that we go on dinner break. May I get a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Member Bolianis. Ms. Barrera, may I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Calderon,
Approve.
Vice Chair Budinara,
Approved.
Member Bolianis,
Approved.
Member Duncan,
Approve.
Member Reichfeld.
Approved.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barrera. We'll be back shortly. I'll come back. I make a motion that we come back from lunch. May I get a second, please?
Seconded.
Thank you, Member Bolianis. Ms. Barrera, may I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Calderon,
Approve.
Vice Chair Budonaro,
Approved.
Member Bolianis,
Approved.
Member Duncan,
Approve.
Member Rachfeld.
Approved.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barrera. With that being said, the next order of business will be officer-involved shooting cases. The first case to be reviewed today will be APD case number 25-0048815, presented by Vice Chair Buonanno.
Thank you, Chair. It did not go on. Okay. We're reviewing case APD case 25-0048815. This incident occurred on June 15th, 2025 at approximately 3:08. It occurred at 205 60th Street Northwest. On that afternoon, Albuquerque police officers responded to a report of an armed robbery at the Circle K convenience store on Coors Boulevard Northwest, and the suspect had already fled the scene, and it was reported to be armed with a handgun. In a short period of time, Officer 2, assigned to the investigative support unit, received the GPS cache tracker alert from the same locations. Officers pulled the security camera footage and identified the suspect. That that identification set all of the events into motion. Police drone was deployed near 63rd Street and Avalon Road. Officers tracked the single male carrying a backpack. His movements matched the GPS tracker data, and Officer 1 made visual contact to confirm the individual matched the suspect in the surveillance photos. Officer 1 stated he was actually 100% certain this was the man responsible for the robbery. Officer 1 activated emergency lights as the suspect approached 60th Street. Officer 2 issued a verbal command, and the suspect began running on foot, heading westbound. Officers 1 and 2 immediately pursued. What followed involved 5 officers and 16 documented use of force actions. Officer 2 deployed a 40-millimeter round, striking the suspect's backpack to no effect. Officer 3 followed with a 40-millimeter round to the same area, but still no effect. Both officers fired second rounds, both missed. The situation began to escalate quickly. The drone operator observed Mr. M reaching for a handgun. Officer 1 raised his rifle and pointed it at the subject. Seconds later, Mr. M appeared to raise a weapon toward the officers. Officer 1 discharged 5 rounds. Officer 2 then fired a third 40-millimeter round, which missed. Officer 4 pointed his rifle, unable to see Mr. M's hands. Officer 1 also maintained his rifle at the ready. Officer 3 pointed the 40-millimeter launcher. Officer 1 again pointed his rifle as Mr. M began climbing the fence. Officer 3 deployed a 40-millimeter round that struck Mr. M. Officer 2 followed with another 40-millimeter round, also striking Mr. M. Officer 1 did not fire. Officer 5 pointed his handgun twice while approaching the fence. Mr. M did stop. He finally complied. He was taken into custody without further incident. Internal Affairs Force Division reviewed all 16 uses of force actions across all 5 officers. Every single action was found to be within APD policy. The force was determined to be reasonable, minimal, and necessary given the totality of the circumstances. Mr. M sustained an abrasion on his right shin and a gunshot wound to his right hip. Medical aid was provided on scene. No officers were injured. Mr. M was charged with robbery with a deadly weapon, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and an outstanding felony warrant. 3 potential policy violations were identified. The first, SOP 232-3-4A-1, involves due care and sound judgment in firearms deployment. The second, SOP 2-54-6-D-2-D, addresses the restriction on pointing an electronic control weapon and firearm at the same time. The third, SOP 2-564-A-1C, involves the use of force reporting requirements. 1 tactical concern was also noted. Officers closed distance on the suspect rather than available cover and concealment. A management tactical review had been generated as well.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Cool. Any questions for the Vice Chair? No, perfect. Awesome. We'll move on to the CPOA. Deputy Director?
Yes.
Perfect.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. This incident involved an officer-involved shooting during an attempt by detectives assigned to the investigative support unit to apprehend a suspect involved in an armed robbery. The subject was tracked, as Member Budanaro stated, using a 3SI tracking device. When detectives attempted to make contact, the subject fled on foot. During the incident, a detective deployed a drone and relayed real-time information to the detectives pursuing the subject on foot, including the subject's movements and actions, along with the information that the subject is now armed. The investigation further documented that the drone battery depleted during the incident, causing the drone to return to its launch location, and there was no recording that could be located and available for further review. Detectives pursued the subject on foot through an open field. The investigation and the review of objective OBRD evidence showed that officers issued multiple force warnings and commands and deployed several less lethal 40 millimeter launchers. One detective who was providing lethal coverage reported observing the subject move a firearm from one hand to another and extended an arm in the direction of the officer. The detective then discharged 5 rounds, striking the subject once. Following the shooting, the subject continued running and climbed a fence into the backyard of a residence. Officers located the subject a short time later and took him into custody without any further use of force. The subject sustained a gunshot wound to his hip area. Officers on scene, they provided him with medical assistance, applied chest seals on him, and he was transported to the hospital and was later discharged, I believe the same day, and transported to MDC and booked on the charges. During the course of the force investigation, as Member Budanaro stated, there were other matters that were identified, including firearm handling and safety issues, ECW considerations, and a non-reportable show of force. Those all matters were addressed through the department's internal review process. And there was several other, there was an issuance of mandatory training referral as well in this case. It is unclear from the available documentation that we reviewed whether those referrals or trainings were completed. And based on the preponderance of the evidence and the totality of the circumstance, the Internal Affairs Force Division found the force to be minimal, reasonable, and necessary to achieve the lawful objective and based on the facts, circumstances surrounding this incident. Stand for question.
Thank you, sir. Questions? No? Perfect. Thank you, sir. Next up is Deputy Commander Nico.
I do have a question.
Hello, sir.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Do you have anything to add to that?
No, very thorough presentation, and I'll stand for any questions if you have any.
Thank you, sir.
I've got one quick question on the tactical concern. As much as I like to say I know all the SOPs inside and out, I don't. But looking at the body cam footage, I couldn't help but notice there wasn't a heck of a lot of cover to be had in the first place. And it made me think, what if that had happened like near Bloom Fiesta Park and there is no cover?
Right.
What do they do then?
Well, if there's no cover, there's no cover. But in this particular case, there's more of a concealment rather than cover. You did have a fence there. And rather than closing distance, the officers are trained to go ahead and attempt communication, use time and distance to their advantage. And what we found was it could have been done better. So that's what the concern stemmed from that.
Yeah. Okay, I failed that in RBC because I didn't cover.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I did have one comment more than anything else, and this is more for officer number 5, that I appreciated him. There was another officer who did, while having his firearm out, pulled out his ECW, and then the officer 5 was like, hey, no, put that back. Like that's, and so like I appreciated that, as well as that same officer informed the same officer, because he was getting not Officer 5 was getting aggravated with the individual, and Officer 5 was like, "Hey, go cool off, and then come back." So I appreciated seeing that on the OBRD footage, that officers are holding each other accountable.
Absolutely.
And also kudos to the other officer to say, "Yes, you're right, back off," and then came back, and you could definitely see the demeanor shift while that officer was providing medical assistance with Officer 5. So I saw that, and I just wanted to say That's really great to see, and I hope the community can see more of that accountability with APD among officers themselves.
And I appreciate that. From my view, is the training's working.
Yeah.
And so that's obviously before I was in training, and that's one of the nice things whenever I get to watch something like that. And I agree, it's a very powerful moment, at least on my side, from the training aspect, saying we're doing the right things, we're moving in the right direction. Officers are holding each other accountable, which is very, very, very important.
Yeah, and it's small, but very noticeable if you're paying attention for it, and that's a great momentum, and just hoping to keep that going.
Yes, sir.
Any additional questions?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do you have anything else to discuss in this case? Cool. With that being said, I make a motion that the civilian, do we all agree with the findings of IAC?
Yes.
Perfect. With that being said, I make a motion that the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board affirms and upholds the findings of APD's Internal Affairs Force Division investigation for APD case number 25-0048815. May I get a second?
I second that, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Ms. Pereira, may I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Calderon?
Approved.
Vice
Affirm,
Chair-
sorry. Affirm.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Affirm, sorry.
Okay. Chair Calderon affirmed. Vice Chair Benenaro?
Affirmed.
Member Bolianis?
Affirmed.
Member Duncan?
Affirm.
Member Reichfeld?
Affirmed.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Pereira. With that being said, we'll move on to APD case number 25-0049270, presented by Member Bolianis.
Thank you, Chair Calderon. This incident happened June 17th, 2025, approximately 4:30 in the afternoon, or no, in the morning. I don't know hours. 0400, I don't know. It's the morning. APD was dispatched to Hotel Parks on Central regarding a female subject, Miss H, who refused to leave the property. Prior to the officer's arrival, dispatch received updates that Miss H was causing a disturbance, damage to property, and had disarmed hotel security and was actively firing a firearm. Upon arrival, officers observed Miss H armed with a firearm and issued repeated verbal commands to drop the firearm. Miss H disregarded the commands and continued to wave the firearm and continued to discharge multiple rounds. Miss H subsequently pointed the firearm towards the officer and fired a round, striking the driver's side mirror of a nearby SUV. In response to that, Officer 1 fired 3 rounds, Officer 2 fired 7 rounds, and Officer 3 fired 6 at Miss H. The officers secured the firearm, and EMS personnel was allowed to approach and render medical aid. The force being used, Officer 1 had 3 firearm discharges. Officer 2, again, had 7. Officer 3 had 6. Those were all in policy. Based on the totality of circumstances, the force was reasonable, minimal, and necessary. The individual was deceased due to her injuries. Medical was provided. No other uses of force was found with this individual. As far as policy violations, personal rules, regulations, tactical training, policy equipment, no deficiencies or concerns were identified.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Member Bolianis? Cool. Awesome. Deputy Director Abbasi, go ahead.
Yes, Chair, members of the board, this incident involved an officer-involved shooting that occurred during a response to a call at Hotel Park Central. The call was initially dispatched as a disturbance call and was later updated to include information that the incident involved a suicidal individual. The individual had multiple prior contacts with APD in the days preceding the incident. Information reviewed during the investigation documented a history of mental health related contacts and diagnoses. Prior to officers' arrival, the individual was reported to have caused disturbance inside the hotel and damaged property in the lobby area. The investigation further documented that the individual obtained a firearm from a security guard and discharged the weapon. Upon arrival, officer established position, utilizing distance and cover, and issued commands directing the individual to drop the firearm. The individual discharged a total of 9 rounds, including rounds fired in the direction of responding officers. Several officers in response discharged their firearms, striking the individual who was then pronounced deceased at the scene. The investigation documented concerns regarding the response times and staffing within the area command where the incident occurred. Officers from other area commands basically responded to assist for this call. The investigation further noted that the rapidly evolving nature of the incident did not provide responding officers with an opportunity to retrieve rifles prior to engaging in this incident. No hotel staff, members of the public, or officers were injured during this incident. And based on the preponderance of the evidence and the totality of the circumstance, the IAFT determined that the uses of force by officers was consistent with department policy, and the officers' actions were reasonable, minimal, and necessary to address the immediate deadly threat posed by this individual in this incident. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Deputy Commander, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't.
Okay. Board members, do you have any questions for the Deputy Director or Deputy Commander? No? Cool. Thank you both. Cool. Do we agree with the findings from IAFD?
Yes.
Yes. Perfect. So with that being said, I make a motion that the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board affirms and upholds the findings of APD's Internal Affairs Force Division investigation for APD case number 25-0049270. May I get a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Member Williams. Ms. Barrera, may I get a roll call vote?
Chair Calderon,
Affirmed.
Vice Chair Budenaro,
Affirm.
Member Bolianitz,
Affirmed.
Member Duncan. Affirm. Member Reichfeld.
Affirm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barrera. With that being said, we'll move to APD case number 25-0063515, presented by myself. Date of this case was on August 2nd of 2025 at 14:2600 hours. Use of forces that were used were level 3, officer 1, a critical firearm discharge with rifle ×1. Level 2, officer number 2, 40mm deployment ×2, both were missed. Level 1, officer 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6, a show of force with their rifles. And officers number 7 and 8, show of force with their handguns. On August 2nd of 2025 at approximately 1400 hours, I can't talk either, 14:2600 hours, the Albuquerque Police Department responded to multiple reports of domestic disturbance involving gunfire at an apartment complex. Callers reported hearing yelling, approximately 17 gunshots, and a male subject walking around with a firearm. One caller stated that they could hear gunshots coming from inside the residence. The victim advised that dispatch that the subject was inside the residence, intoxicated and armed. CAD information further indicated that the subject had a history involving negligent use of a deadly weapon and other offenses. Upon arrival of officers, they believed they were responding to a potential active shooter incident and established a force array. The victim exited the residence and was escorted to safety. She appeared injured and informed officers that the subject was drinking and suicidal. The subject I can't talk right now. The subject exited the residence. Officers identified themselves and repeatedly ordered him to show his hands. The subject removed a handgun from his waistband and held it in his hand. Multiple officers immediately covered him with their firearms due to perceived threat. Officers attempted to de-escalate the situation, provided reassurance regarding his safety. During the encounter, the subject moved the firearm, struck himself in the head with it, causing injury, and failed to comply with commands. One officer attempted to communicate in Spanish to facilitate de-escalation. After hearing a gunshot discharged by the subject, the officer deployed a single 40mm less lethal round, which did not strike him. Additional officers maintained less lethal fourth coverage throughout the incident. As the confrontation continued, a supervising officer directed deployment of a 40mm launcher. Shortly therefore, as the subject raised his firearm, an officer discharged a single round from his duty rifle, striking the subject. The subject fell to the ground and was no longer visible to officers. At that point, the subject was incapacitated. Outcome of the incident, the pointing of the firearm, deployment of 40mm less lethal launchers, and the officers involved shooting were investigated by Internal Affairs Force Division. IAFD determined that all the forces were objectively reasonable within APD policy. The behavior of the subject was, after being into custody, they were deceased, so they were not taken to custody. Medical attention was provided after securement was conducted. Injuries were not sustained by officers. Suspect sustained a fatal gunshot wound. The suspect was facing charges of aggravated battery upon a household member, negligent use of a deadly weapon, child abuse, neglect, and false imprisonment. No other forces were located for the suspect. Policy discrepancies discovered. Supervision. Supervisors were present at the scene directing traffic with no direct supervision to ensure that possible tactical positioning of the officers occurred and MTR was submitted. No deficiencies or concerns were identified for tactics, training, policy, equipment, administrative instructions, personnel rules, regulations, or SOPs. That being said, any questions?
No, sir.
Cool. Perfect, thank you. Deputy Director Abbasi?
Yes, Chair. Chair, members of the board, this OIS occurred during a response to a domestic violence call. Officers responded after AFR requested police assistance following reports of gunshots originating from the residence that they were going to. Multiple officers arrived on scene and attempted to communicate with subject. The subject was observed in the driveway of the residence holding a firearm and did not comply with the officer's commands. A SWAT officer who was working in the field also responded to the scene. During the encounter, 2 40mm less lethal rounds were deployed and did not strike the subject. A SWAT officer subsequently discharged a firearm, striking the subject, who was then pronounced deceased on the scene. The IAFD investigation identified supervisory matters for review related to critical incident management. The investigation documented that 2 sergeants were engaged in traffic control and perimeter-related responsibilities during the incident and did not serve in direct supervisory role over the scene. The mandatory training referrals were issued to both supervisors regarding critical incident supervision practices. Potential safety risks to community members were also observed during our review, as several vehicles traveled through the active scene while the incident was ongoing, despite both supervisors being on traffic and setting perimeter duties. Based on the preponderance of the evidence, the IFD investigation called the deadly use of force inconsistent with department policy, as it was reasonable, minimal, and necessary to address the perceived threat during this incident. Stand for questions.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Questions for Deputy Director? Deputy Commander?
Nothing else to add,
Perfect.
Mr. Chairman?
You get the hang of it eventually.
It's all right.
No worries. Any questions for Deputy Commander? Thank you, sir. No questions either. With that being said, do we all agree with the findings of IAFD?
Yes.
Perfect. Give me 1 second. Let me switch real quick. Make sure you get the right number. Okay. So I make a motion that the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board affirms and upholds the findings of APD's Internal Affairs Force Division investigation for APD case number 25-00635515. Make it a second, please.
Seconded.
Thank you, Member Bouillard. Ms. Barrera, may I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Calderon,
Affirm.
Vice Chair Budenora,
Affirm.
Member Bolianitz,
Affirmed.
Member Duncan. Affirm. Member Reichfeld.
Affirm.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barrera.
You're welcome.
That will complete our officer-involved shooting cases. We'll move, the next order of business will be serious use of force cases. We have 2 of those. First case will be, APD case number will be 25-00596337, presented by Member Rothschild, excuse me. Sir.
Thank you, Chair Calderon. On July 20th, 2025, police responded to a domestic disturbance call involving a man making dangerous threats. Officers entered the residence and placed the resident Troy Bell into a patrol car without initial incident. While inside the patrol car, Mr. Bell became highly upset upon hearing his girlfriend state that she was living with the child. He began shouting and kicking the interior door of the vehicle. Rather than de-escalating, officer number 1 opened the car door and insulted Mr. Bell by calling him a little boy. Mr. Bell responded by kicking officer number 1 in the chest, prompting officer number 1 to pull him out of the vehicle by his ankle, causing him to fall to the ground. On the ground, Mr. Bell freed one hand from his handcuffs. 4 officers worked together to pin him face down, secure his arms, and restrain his ankles. Once restrained, Mr. Bell became cooperative, and medical care was administered. Mr. Bell sustained widespread scrapes and cuts across his arms, hands, knees, shoulders, back, and foot. 2 officers also received minor cuts and scrapes.
Mr. Bell was charged with domestic violence, battery, and on a household member, and 2 counts of battery on a peace officer. He had no prior history of use of force incidents. Investigation findings and actions. The Internal Affairs Force Division and the Force Review Board reviewed the 10 instances of force used during the event. Officer number 1, policy violations. His actions were ruled out of policy and not necessary. He violated 3 major department rules: unnecessary use of force, breach of the code of conduct, using insulting language, and failure to utilize de-escalation techniques. Officer number 2 and 3 and 4, number 2, number 3, and number 4, in policy. The force used by these 3 officers to regain control of the situation was ruled in policy. Officer number 4 physically separated the aggressive officer number 1 from the suspect and used a calm conversational tone to successfully de-escalate and quiet the scene. Because of this actions, officer number 4 was formally nominated for de-escalation officer of the month.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Any questions? No? Deputy Director Bassi? Floor is yours.
Yes, Chair, members of the board, this incident involved a use of force encounter that occurred during, again, a domestic dispute call. Based on reported exigent circumstances, officers utilized cellular location information to identify the location associated with this call. Residents were escorted from the residence, and 1 individual was detained and placed in the patrol vehicle without any incident. During the investigation, officers established probable cause for the charge of battery against a household member. While seated in the rear of the patrol vehicle, the individual became argumentative after another involved party directed a statement toward him, and he began kicking the door of the patrol vehicle. The IAFD investigation documented that an officer made inappropriate comments to the subject, which resulted in subject kicking the officer in the chest. The individual was subsequently removed from the patrol vehicle and taken into ground while he was handcuffed. IFD determined that the officer's comments were not in accordance with the department policy and documented that the officer's actions necessitated the need to use force. Based on our review of this incident and the review of several other incidents where a passive restraint system or press was utilized, officers have used the term press when providing warnings to gain compliance. In this case, the officer warned the subject something along the line that if you keep kicking, I'm going to put you in press. The CPOA observed that the term press may not be readily understood by the individuals and recommends that the department consider using more descriptive language when issuing commands and warnings about the consequences of non-compliance. The IAFD investigation also documented additional matters, as Member Reichswell stated, regarding officers' conduct and de-escalation efforts, which were all handled appropriately through the department's internal review processes. The force application by 1 particular officer was deemed out of policy. The CPOA, similar to IAFD, also commends one of the officer for their efforts to de-escalate the situation throughout the entirety of this encounter as well. So that's all I have. Stand for questions.
Thank you, sir. Questions? Questions? Perfect. Thank you, sir. Deputy Commander, anything to add?
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would like to add about this is I think it's important to also recognize that with that same officer, all subsequent uses of force were also found to be out of policy as well because of the original actions by that officer, which led to that original use of force being out of policy. All subsequent ones were also out of policy, so it's an important dynamic. Plus, I wanted to highlight that at the time, the policy addressed that there was a higher level of force because the individual was in handcuffs when he was pulled from the unit, which resulted in what we called a level 3 use of force, which is the difference between why it was a higher level of force. So I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Questions? No? Good. Questions? Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Perfect. With that, do we agree with the findings from IAFD? Yes. Yeah. Do we agree with the findings? We agree with the findings? Okay. I make a motion that the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board affirms and upholds the findings of APD's Internal Affairs Force Division investigation for APD case number 25-00599637. May I get a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Ms. Barrera, may I get a roll call vote?
Chair Calderon,
Affirmed.
Vice Chair Budenaro,
Affirmed.
Member Bolianis,
Affirm.
Member Duncan,
Affirm.
Member Richfield.
Affirm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Barrera. With that being said, we'll be on our last case, which is APD case number 25-006437, presented by Member Duncan. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Calderon. So this incident happened on August 5th, 2025 at 12:30 hours at McDonald's at 300 Lomas Boulevard Northeast. Officers responded to the McDonald's regarding a subject who had previously been trespassed from the property and was refusing to leave. A subsequent call reported a disturbance involving a male allegedly throwing rocks at a female and sitting in a blue van. Upon arrival, the officer contacted a witness who reported the male had been assaulting a female and attempting to set her vehicle on fire. The officer observed a burning rag near the van, instructed Mr. S. to exit the vehicle, move the burning rag, and place his hands behind his back. Mr. S. complied initially, but became panicked when he was advised that he was being detained, repeatedly yelling no and pulling away from the officer. The officer grabbed Mr. S.'s right ankle, pulled him forward, and released Mr. S.'s hand, and Mr. S. flipped backwards, kicking his legs over his head, and landed on his knees with his back facing the officer. The officer grabbed Mr. S.'s shoulders with both hands and then pulled his body to the left, and he had him lie on his right side. The use of force were investigated by IFD and found to be objectively reasonable within APD's policy. Medical personnel responded and evaluated Mr. S. at the scene. Mr. S. was transported to UNM Hospital for treatment and later taken to the Prisoner Transport Center. He sustained minor abrasions, bruising, redness. No injuries to the officer were reported. Mr. S. was charged with battery on a peace officer, battery on a household member, criminal damage to property, and had an outstanding felony warrant. The use of force were investigated and found to be reasonable. Tactics during the transport, Mr. S. Remained handcuffed in front, and an email was sent to the officer's supervisor to address the issue. There were no deficiencies or concerns in training, no deficiencies or concern in policy. With equipment, a magazine did fall off officer's vest during the force. This was addressed during his interview with IFD, and there are no deficiencies or concerns with supervision.
Thank you, Member Duncan. Any questions from Member Duncan? Cool. Deputy Director Bassi?
Nothing to add, set for questions.
That's
She
the
did a
first
good
time
job.
ever. Any questions for Deputy Director? Okay. That threw me for a loop, dang it. Okay, any question? Deputy
to
Commander,
add.
do you have anything to add? Okay, cool. Any questions for Deputy Commander? Cool, perfect. Thank you. With that being said, do we agree with the findings for IAFD? Yep, cool. With that being said, I make a motion that the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board affirms and upholds the findings of APD's Internal Affairs Force Division investigation for APD case number 25-006437. May I get a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Member Bolianis. Ms. Barrera, may I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Calderon,
Affirm.
Vice Chair Budenaro,
Affirm.
Member Bolianis,
Affirmed.
Member Duncan,
Affirm.
Member Richfield.
Affirm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barrera.
You're welcome.
Good job, guys. Your first two cases, or first case of the year to present. Good job. Cool. Awesome. So with that, we'll be moving on to the next order of business, which will be reports from CPOB subcommittees, the Policy and Procedure Review Subcommittee, presented by Member Vice Chair Budenaro.
Thank you, Chair. We had our meeting, it held on June 4th, and the subcommittee discussed all of the policies and procedures to review, of course. Our next meeting is coming up July 2nd at 3, and we'll be meeting then, and I'm going to turn things back over to the chair.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Reamer. You're gonna wait for like five more minutes, just saying. Just say, you're ready. It's okay, I'll take it. Thank you, Vice Chair. Next order of business will be discussion of possible action items. First up will be the Ad Hoc Policy Oversight Ordinance Committee, chaired by myself and Member Bolianis. You want dates, is what you want, correct? And we want them before August, correct?
Yes, Chair. So again, just as a reminder, the City Council when we went through the ordinance amendment for the PSA non-sworn issue, City Council actually liked that collaborative meeting that we had amongst the various stakeholders. And so they wanted to have a similar process come August when they come back into session. So if we have some either concepts or a rough draft or something to at least start that ball rolling, they wanted to start looking at it in August. So we ideally would like to have something, for sure in July, at least a couple, ideally if one can be scheduled for June. So if the two members can take a look at your schedule and get with me so that we can go ahead and have a couple of these meetings prior to the August deadline, so we have some kind of a framework to work with.
Okay. We will get you dates by the end of this, if not by tomorrow.
Okay.
What's your email?
If you want to just go ahead, I actually with the audit subcommittee or ad hoc, we were talking, so I'm going to be calling member Budnaro at that time, so I can just talk to you folks tomorrow too, and we'll figure out what works. So.
That works. Cool. Thank you. Perfect. Next item is 2026 Annual NACOL Conference. Executive Director McDermott.
Yes. For those that are new to the board and are not familiar with, NACOL is the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, and it's a primarily national conference, although international members do attend the conference, and it is generally for all the various oversight entities that exist in, again, typically United States, but again, there are some other international folks too. And it is an opportunity to network and compare various oversight agencies, find improvements. The conference consists of multiple sessions, classes involving different aspects of oversight, data collection, investigations, boards and commissions, director leadership. It's a whole gambit of different things. Jails and prisons is another aspect as well. And so it starts on Sunday. This is something sort of new. They've been doing Sunday sessions, ones that are specifically for board members, ones that are specifically for investigators, and ones that are specifically for directors or executive leadership. So we are seeking, this year we should have some funding for that. We didn't have funding to send anybody last year because the CPOA had to dedicate funding towards the various improvements for where we moved, so we didn't have the funding, but this year we should have funding to send 2 board members. So we always send 2 board members to keep it under that quorum issue, and then some staff will also be attending the NACOL conference. So the request is that you here tonight decide which 2 of you are going to, or are willing, or interested in attending the conference so that we can get that process started because registration is now open. The city does cover your registration fee, it does cover your flight and your hotel, and you have a per diem. So pretty much you just need to decide amongst you which of the 2 of you can go for that full time. You do have to be focused on the classes, so you won't be able to do like other work or things like that remotely. So that's primarily it. So.
We hashed it out already. I did the legwork, so I have to find up here.
Yeah, and the date's November 8th through the 12th. I've just been reminded, and it's in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yep.
So.
You said St. Louis.
Same thing.
Yeah, I mean, the urban capital.
Only you would know that. Oh,
Crest
that's what I know.
sky's blue, like that.
Very well. So spoke to all the different board members. Member Duncan has declined due to new position, new job. Member Boyanis is not able to. Vice Chair has decided not to. And then myself, I'm a yes, because I'm always willing to go talk about us and the amazingness that we are. And then Member Rossfeld is a yes as well for that time frame. And so it'd be myself and Member Rossfeld.
So Chair Calderon and Member Exman.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Agree, board members? If not, you can say no. Oh, no.
Now you're interested that it's Louisville, aren't you?
Oh my God.
So you'll be working with Katrina to coordinate travel and things like that. She'll be setting up everything with you, so we'll get that process rolling. But you know, she'll be needing different pieces of information from you to get all your stuff set up. So just be on the lookout for that.
Watch your email. There'll be some forms that Katrina needs from us, and the faster you get it to her, the better for her. Yeah, oh my God. And now she'll call you. Cool. With that being said, then we'll move on to the next agenda item, which will be APD policy. Mr. Reamer. See, this is what happens.
Wait at the wrong time, sorry.
No worries, sir. Do you want to read this off, or do you want me to read it off? Okay. We'll pass it off to Vice Chair real quick to read off the no recommendations, and then you can go to your side, okay?
Thank you, Chair. We had no recommendations for the following SOPs: 1-17 Aviation, SOP 1-41 Evidence Unit, SOP 1-80 Prisoner Transport Unit, SOP 218 Contact with Individuals with Hearing, Speech, and/or Vision Impairment and Disabilities, SOP 2-63 Crime Stopper Investigations, SOP 2-65 Language Access Procedure, SOP 2-77 In-Car Video Systems, SOP 3-40 Civil Litigation Process, and those are the SOPs. So, Mr. Rimmer.
Yes, I can begin with the off-cycle if that's.
Stand by for that one. So let me
Please.
transition that, okay? So with that, we'll move on to the next order of business, which will be the off-cycle policy, which will be SOP 2-16 reports. Mr. Reamer?
Yes, so off-cycle policy consideration, so no deadline coming up for a 35-day review on this. This is to hopefully spark some memories. It was 2 months ago, I believe, at this point, that a non-concurrence was presented before this board about an incident that took place between, just to provide some general context about the incident. Two people got in an argument. There was an alleged spitting. The alleged victim of that spitting called the police. The police arrived and began to collect evidence on what was allegedly this misdemeanor battery from the spitting. In the CPOA investigation, it was determined that, at least in part, that under 260, that frontline officer that reported to the call was sustained, and APD affirmed it when it comes to ensuring all tasks necessary to complete a preliminary investigation are complete. There were a couple things in this case that were left outstanding that where it was clear that the best evidence that was obtainable maybe or probably wasn't obtained, specifically not talking to the accused at the time, who actually, in fact, in this case, was the complainant. There was, the biggest standout was that there was potentially CCTV footage available of maybe of the incident, or at least surrounding the incident, that was touched on, but it was not thoroughly reviewed or collected to the point of verifying whether the incident was actually captured. And there was also something about whether the saliva itself could be obtained from the victim or alleged victim. Hopefully that sparks some memories, but when it comes to the non-concurrence, what happened is that the CPOA sustained the frontline officer, that responding officer under 260, the preliminary investigations, for not thoroughly reviewing all that evidence, and they also sustained the supervisor under 216.5A1, which reads as department supervisors shall review reports for grammar and elements of the crime and ensure the narrative supports each event card and listed charges when applicable. APD IAPS not concurred with this and said that to support the charged crime of misdemeanor battery, Officer M only needed to show probable cause that the battery occurred. Collecting video and interviewing the complainant would have provided additional evidence, helpful for prosecution, but was not required for the showing of probable cause. Based on the statement of the victim and the already recording of an additional person on scene who heard the commotion but did not see the battery or spitting. So once this was presented at the board meeting, one of the members, I believe it was Member Bouillon, said that was something that we could talk about in the subcommittee meeting, so I ensured that we did. I collected some data about both of these. So the 216.5A1, that directive, not going all the way back to December of 2022, it's only been investigated by both the CPOA and the IAPS 11 times, sustained 4. But if you look at 260, the preliminary investigations one, that is we hit on that one quite a lot. There's been 41 investigations, 38 CPCs, 3 IA investigations. 18 of those have been sustained over time. But focusing on 216.5A1 in particular, as written, it appears to be mostly a legal sufficiency check. The challenge is finding a balance between this legal sufficiency check and a thorough supervisory review that may require too much of APD's supervisors.
One thing, what I came up with without changing the policy language too much or adding this italicized language would be department supervisor shall review reports for grammar and elements of the crime and ensure the narrative supports each event card and listed charges and reflects reasonable steps to identify, collect, and document available evidence under the circumstances when applicable. We discussed this for quite a while in the subcommittee meeting, and it's really about trying to thread that needle between supervisors doing an actual thorough review of an incident report and but not taking it too far where they're expected to basically reinvestigate the incident themselves. So it's maybe language could be added to this directive to improve that. But at the same time, I think we have to be considerate of the consideration that this is how a lot of supervision works, right? That you have to trust the frontline people to do the best job they can, and provided what they write in the report makes logical sense and coherent sense, and is legally sufficient, then you can kind of sign off on it, right? And maybe adding language that expands beyond that anymore could open the door to supervisors basically having to spend quite a lot of their time reinvestigating incidences that have already been investigated by the frontline officers. So it's maybe I haven't developed the best language, but I tried not to take it too far at the same time. It's just one of those where I have a feeling that it would even if this recommendation that I put forward and reflects reasonable steps to identify, collect, and document available evidence under the circumstances, I don't know if it would have changed the non-concurrence in this case, right? IAPS might have still felt that was done in this incident. So it's really just opening the discussion for a consideration of if that particular directive in 216, if more of a burden can be placed on supervisors and how much and whether it would be worth it. So,
thank you. Agent, Deputy Director, Executive Director.
Well, the only thing I'll add to that, is, the SOP talks about making sure that at least the subject is interviewed, and if not, you document why. And so in this case, the subject wasn't interviewed, and we're holding an officer accountable. A supervisor should have some level of responsibility of, hey, I noticed you didn't document why you didn't speak to the subject. Why is that? And kick it back for the officer to put that extra documentation in. So I think that's one of the key elements to this one and this issue, is that at least these big things, like the subject wasn't spoken to, should be a trigger to the supervisor of, hey, you need to tell me why, because that's required by 260. So even if there are other elements like, yes, there was probable cause or not, that's getting maybe too much into the weeds, but some of those big features on 260 that are missing to where we're sustaining and they're agreeing, the supervisor should have caught those as well, is the point of this addition.
Thank you.
So I want to kind of echo what Executive Director McDermott said, because oddly enough, I was the one who made the biggest stink. Surprise, surprise, I know. And I saw this more as a CYA more than anything else, right? Is just what I refer to it as a sanity check, just to be like, hey, are these included? Did you do not? And again, to Mr. Reamer's point, the supervisor should not reinvestigate, but he can ask. In this particular instance, it's, hey, you notated CCTV. Did you notate, what steps did you take to try to get a hold of that? That's all the question is, right? It's what steps did you take? Hey, these are not included, just sanity check, go back. And that's what this is trying to get to Executive Director McDermott's point of, if an officer didn't do the right report and it was still submitted, that should still be an issue with the leadership who signed off on the report, right? It's holding both accountable when it comes to reports but we do not want the supervisors to reinvestigate, if that makes any sense.
I think so. Any questions in this end? Okay. So, Mr. Reamer, with the recommendation that you wrote on your report, do you feel confident enough to send that forward, or do you want to modify it a little more?
Well, after this, as I stand here and think about it more, there's potential it could be made specific to those kind of points. So as the executive director mentioned, that the thing that stood out to our office was that
the subject wasn't interviewed, and there was potential actually that could have happened, provided that they looked into it and made the phone call. So maybe instead of this kind of broad language I'm suggesting on the report, it could actually be a more specific call to that kind of information. If it's potential, ensure if there was potential that a subject or a victim could be interviewed, to try to do that and ensure that happened. If there's video evidence, potentially for video evidence, you can ensure that happened. But then we perhaps run into the situation where we create a list that won't stop growing, and it'll just start to look like 260. There's still the fear that it'll turn into in the same issue, but perhaps not. It could just be isolated on those select variables that are the most important. Or this recommendation could go forward, although I would, I appreciate one bad thing about it being off cycle, which it's never bad to consider policies for improvement, is that in PPRB is a great time for me to have a conversation. I could of course still email this to the current, the 216 author and get their opinions on it, or even have a phone call with them, kind of optioning this language and see how they feel about it. And then we can go from there. I could report back on that. Or we could I could work harder to develop kind of a more systematic and specific recommendation for this. But it's really, I'm comfortable with doing anything, even as far as just putting the recommendation forward and it being rejected or accepted as is. So.
Okay. Deputy Director.
Just to add, Chair, I think in this particular case, this was the issue that we had a disagreement or difference of opinion with APD, where they disagreed with what we found that the supervisor should have done this. In terms of the big policy issue, we don't know how many times a supervisor has kicked back to a report based on those observations. So I think it'll be reasonable for us to look more into that information, because we don't have that information right now in hand. So it's more like a case issue than a policy issue, in my opinion, right now.
So do you think it'd be better to go the route, and as Reamer said, reach out to the policy owner, have a discussion first, and then go from there? Do you think they'd be more comfortable doing that?
I think that'd be a better route.
I think that's a good way to partner because if we just kick something over, right, people might get, why didn't you even have a conversation up? But if we at least try to foster that conversation with the policy owner of 216, I think that we'll get some more light, right? Because we don't know what we don't know, and we want to know APD's view on it, right? Because they might see it differently, and we're not them, so we don't see that. So I think having that transparency and that line of communication will be helpful.
I think that works, especially because it's not a cycle policy. Yeah. So we'll start there.
And the deputy director's point's great that, we don't know how many times this has actually worked as intended, exactly as the policy want, because it wouldn't turn into a policy violation, then it wouldn't stand out to us. So it'd be hard to find in the mix of all the thousands of reports that are done. So if we know that that's happening, then that may just make us feel more confident in this directive as it is. But certainly getting their consideration to try and expand it too, and just get more context would be helpful. So
perfect. With that being said, I know we don't have to vote for that, but is the board okay with that direction? Perfect. Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions on that specific topic? Nope. Cool. So the next agenda item will be the APD response to policy recommendations as well by Mr. Reamer. And sir, you have a recommendation response from SOP 1-80 Prisoner Transport Unit from the PTU.
Yes, so this is purely informational. There's no recommended action on this one unless something comes up, of course. But I just wanted to make the entire board aware of the recommendation and the context that was provided by the author, which is really appreciated. So the CPOA submitted a pre-PPRB recommendation that was accepted by APD. The APD author also included additional context in their response. The CPOA investigators, on the recommendation now, CPOA investigators have recommended that SOP 180 be revised to explicitly state severe intoxication in the refusal criteria under section 185A. While many intoxicated behaviors may already be captured by the existing disorderly behaviors or mobility limitations criteria, the policy does not make this explicit, and the CPOA investigators have encountered a case in which PTU personnel were sustained for transporting a very intoxicated individual. CPO investigators believe this kind of situation would be less likely if the policy explicitly stated that severe intoxication is a potential reason for PTU to refuse transport, and PTU personnel may be more likely to contact a PTU supervisor for guidance in such situations. So the recommendation itself would follow the format of the existing list in section 185A and is written as put in policy now. 5, severe intoxication, A underneath of it. If an in-custody individual is displaying signs of intoxication to a degree that
that would make it unsafe for PTU personnel to transport them, including but not limited to I, individuals who are unresponsive or unconscious, II, individuals who are vomiting or at risk of choking, III, individuals who are unable to maintain an upright seated position. The additional context that was sent with the acceptance was that with UNMH no longer staffing medical personnel for pre-intake screenings at the PTC, this would be a very beneficial addition. Under past operations, these refusals would typically occur prior to the exchange of custody, as individuals would be medically refused by UNMH staff during preliminary intake process at the PTC. I didn't know about that before I submitted the recommendation, so it was new information to me, so I just wanted to make sure that you were all aware of it and included it in this report. Nothing further than that.
I think it's a good addition, especially because worst case, our officers take them to PTC, they accept them. Let's say they become more intoxicated while they're there because time, and then they go to MDC and they deny them there. So the officer just took a 40-minute trip out there for no reason, has to drive back into town and take them to UNMH or one of the EDs for severe intoxication. So I think it will help save time, officers' resources, but also protects it. It gives guidance, right? So I think it's a good one.
So my question, right, when I heard this was, why did UNMH stop sending a representative, right? Because they're not necessarily medical providers or medically trained to help with some of that. So that's where it's like, and that's outside of our purview, but like, that's something, is that something we even want to go down to?
I don't want to go down it, but I want to know executive director.
Well, all I can say is that there's basically contractual reasons why that changed, so it's, would it be ideal perhaps, but it's not feasible at the moment. Like I say, there's different contract issues that were going on with there.
Yeah. But yeah, good add. Come on.
Any other questions? You're good? Cool.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you. With that being said, we'll move on to the next order of business, which would be other business. Do anybody have anything else to bring upon the board? Nope. Cool. Awesome. No other business comes before this board. The next order of business is adjournment. The next regularly scheduled board meeting will be held on Thursday, July 9th of 2026 at 5 p.m. in these chambers. With that being said, I make a motion that we adjourn. May I get a second? Seconded. Thank you, Member Bolianis. Ms. Padilla, may I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Calderon?
Approved.
Vice Chair Budenara?
Approve.
Member Bolianis?
Approved.
Member Duncan?
Approved.
Member Reichfeld?
Approved.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Padilla. Thank you and have a great evening. See you at the next meeting.